My thing ain't on. And ending March 31st, 2023. So what do we?
If just open it up for public comment.
Does anybody have any public comments on the proposed fiscal year 23 budget? Again, I will ask, does anybody have any public comments on the proposed fiscal year 23 budget for the city of Belton? Seeing none, I'll close public hearing. Adjourn public hearing, call work session to order. Items for review and discussion. Item A, subdivision plat and vacation of unimproved right-of-way, RG Federal Credit Union.
Yes, Mayor Larkey, thank you. For the next City Council agenda of February 22nd, we will have two recommendations from the Planning Commission from last night, one pertaining to a subdivision plat for the new location for RG Federal Credit Union at the corner of Town Center Drive and Markey Parkway. It's an unplatted property. This is a plat that will have to be filed in order to get the building permit. And a second item is a vacation of existing unimproved dedicated public right-of-way that's necessary for access to the property. So those are two items that will be on your next agenda.
Any questions from anybody? Seeing none, item B, International Building Code Update and Adoption Process.
Thank you, Mayor. The City of Belton currently administers the 2012 International Code Council provisions for residential and mechanical work. We'd like to start the process to adopt the 2018 ICC code. There are many reasons to move towards that code adoption. A number of neighboring municipalities have adopted the 2018 code, and we think it's important to have that kind of consistency within the region. The process would involve taking that 2018 code and examining that code. Most municipalities will not adopt the national code in total. They will make certain amendments that are better suited for their municipalities. We will be looking at amendments that other municipalities have made to help us with the point of beginning, but we also have a consulting chief building official who is currently working on 2018 amendments for other municipalities. We'll be able to draw on that work that he's doing. I think it's important to point out one of the things that building official has information on is local amendments that are acceptable to the Home Builders Association. So that's a very important step to have that taken as you look towards the new code. So that would be the initial process, bringing those local amendments to the code, hearing before the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission would forward a recommendation on to the City Council about the local amendments and the adoption of that. The City Council will then pass an ordinance, and then state statutes mandate that there be a delayed effective date for 90 days prior to implementation. So that allows people to go ahead and get building permits issued, get things handled before the code adoption takes place, which would impact their potential projects. So that would kind of be the timeline and the process. That just serves a very brief summary of that upcoming project. I'd be happy to answer any questions that may come up.
Any questions? Seeing none, item C, water line construction projects, Allen Avenue and Walnut in Maine.
We currently have two projects out for bid. The first one's Allen Avenue. That's going from 157th Street down to 162nd Street and then turning from there and going to the outer road. That will provide a lot better water flow to that whole neighborhood and flow up to Building 4 for North Point's development. As part of this is a public-private partnership where North Point is paying for a portion of the water line. They're paying for basically 160th Street North, and we're paying for the portion to the south. And so this bid will actually open up this Thursday, and you'll see it at the next council meeting for approval. The other water line is on Walnut Street from South Scott coming up to Maine, but it doesn't go all the way to Maine. the water line is actually behind the buildings on Main Street, and runs, and that's where they get their water service from. So as more and more businesses are trying to move to Main Street, this will provide better water flow, because I think the water line there is not much bigger than a 2-inch line behind those businesses. So this will provide just better water flow for operation of those businesses. And if they get to the point where they're big enough where they need fire flow, they'll be able to have good fire flow to those buildings. So that one also opens up the same time on Thursday, and you'll see that at the next council meeting. Happy to answer any questions you have on that.
You're stopping at Walnut. Is there proper water lines from Walnut all the way back to behind City Hall then?
It goes from City Hall. Yeah, from City Hall it has good water. So it's from there, and it extends across down Main Street 2 blocks.
So our issue is just, what is that, the 300 block going to the west then is the biggest issue we're facing?
Right. There's and I don't know how it got this way, but just those 2 blocks have a very small water main. And on either side, it's fine, but it's just behind those 2 blocks that have a problem.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none, item D, street restoration change order.
So at the next council meeting, we'll have a resolution for a change order for our street restoration project. So last year when we bid the job, or approved the job and our resolution, there's a portion of it's paid out of bond money and a portion that's paid out of our operational budget to do some operational work for ourselves, just to do paving. And so now that the job is done, we have the final quantities. We just put those final quantities, adjust them, because it's never exactly to how you bid it. We'll just have the final quantities and have that proposed for you. It's just a slight change of the proportion that's being paid, so it has to go to council for approval.
Any questions? Seeing none, item E, striker maintenance agreement renewal.
At the water treatment plant, we have a contract with Stryker. They are,
Yeah, I think that one's mine.
oh, I'm sorry.
But if you want, I mean, I'll let
Oh,
you.
I thought it was a,
This is renewing a contract that we've had ongoing for several years that maintains and certifies our life pack monitors and then our newer CPR compression devices. So they're a sole source provider. There wasn't anybody else to look for, and so this will just renew it for another year. Any questions on that?
Any questions of Chief Sapp or Greg Rokos? Seeing none. Item F, fiscal year 2023 budget, special revenue, debt service, capital projects fund.
Good evening, council. Tonight, I'll try to go as quickly as possible, but we do have a lot of special revenue funds and a few capital project funds. All of the special revenue funds, the reason that they are separate from the general fund is they are legally restricted and they can only be used for certain purposes. And those purposes are always set out in state law, and that is why they're special revenue funds and not included in the general fund. And then our capital project funds, we use those to account for big projects that are funded with bonds and or federal grants. And that is just an easy way to segregate those projects so that we can have an easy way to account for those to make sure that those dollars are being spent appropriately and that we're spending them all. There are a lot of stipulations with both federal bond proceeds and with grants as far as time frames and things like that. So segregating those into capital projects funds helps make sure that we are being compliant with all those laws and regulations. So I thought we would start tonight on page 31 of your budget book with the park fund. And this is just the summary. There are actually pages from 32 to 43 that have the details of all of these things. I just picked showing you guys the summary so that we could quickly kind of go through it. So taxes and other revenues, they're projected an increase, and that is completely due to property tax revenues being expected to be larger next year. Also, they have a large interfund transfer increase, and their transfer, they typically each year will do a transfer from the park sales tax fund to help cover some of their expenses in the park operating fund. And with the additional sales tax that we are seeing throughout the city, mainly attributed to the projected sales from Chewy next year, it's allowing the city to do a lot of different things. And one of those things is the park is increasing their transfer from that sales tax fund to be able to take care of their operations and also maintain their buildings and assets.
Quick question. Last meeting, you were comparing, when you said an increase, you were comparing the,
Microphone.
I'm sorry. You were comparing the fiscal year 2022 amended budget to the proposed fiscal 2023, but this says 2021. Is that a misprint, or is it just that you don't have data yet for 2022? Or?
No, that is a misprint. So thank you for pointing that out. I believe that if you look in your actual physical budget book, I just copied and pasted. So either I have the wrong year hidden, or
The rest of the pages are right.
okay. So that
Oh, yeah, okay,
one
it's
page
just
is
that page. Okay.
so. Yeah,
Sorry.
it's really interesting the things that you find as you're going through preparing for these work sessions or as you guys are reviewing it. And so I appreciate you guys finding anything that we missed. It's a great big document and we don't catch everything. Okay, so and the revenues can be found on pages 32 and 33. There's not a change in the aquatic center projected revenues. There's not a change in the outdoor water park, or the recreation is just very slightly different. For the High Blue Wellness Center, you can see an increase of about almost 9%. That is really a rate increase for members. And then the next department is special events. This special events department is actually mostly Memorial Station. And you can see that they're expecting an increase in the number of rental contracts, and that's why those numbers are up post-COVID. And then if we look at the expenditures for each department, one of the things that I should tell you guys is that the park department, they have to turn in their projected budget before the city is really finalizing ours, and the park, because the park board has to approve that. And so before we got the final projections in and had calculated what our proposed cost of living increase and grade changes were, the park had already done all the work of trying to calculate their salary and benefit changes. And then they have, like I said, they have to go a little bit earlier than the rest of us. And so then there was additional information that came after that. And so the park's budget, it doesn't have a change in the loggers rate where it reduced, and what they did, instead of calculating a cost of living increase in their proposed budget, they included 2 step increases. So depending on, instead of changing their whole budget proposal, not knowing what the city council would decide to do, they will be able to make changes if the park board chooses to incorporate what the rest of the city did, and they would be able to afford that because of the loggers decrease, if that makes sense. But I did want to tell you there's that little bit of a caveat and a difference, and it's only due to the fact that they have to go faster than the rest of us. And so with that being said, their changes in the administration department, you can see that on page 34, that's the details of that in your budget book. Their administration department has $241,000 of additional expenses. That is due to they added an assistant director. You can't see that in the personnel changes at the back because that change was made mid-year, so it's already been adopted this year. And so if you look in the back, it shows what has already been adopted, but it is a change from what their budget was last year to this year. So they added an assistant director. They also reorged the finance manager position. It used to be in under the High Blue Wellness Center department, and they switched that to administration because it made more sense. And then they also have in here a $14,000 in the administration department, a $14,000 website upgrade under capital items, and let's see, $5,000 for staff appreciation. Then in the maintenance department, they actually eliminated the maintenance superintendent position that was in the prior year's approved budget. That saved $28,000. And then they have $240,000 of capital items. For the outdoor water park, that department shows an increase of about $23,000 from the prior year, and that is $3,000 in salary and benefit increases, $10,000 for 2 replacement computers and to replace the outdoor pool chairs, and about $10,000 due to the increase in the pool management contract. Then the recreation department has an increase of about $65,000 this year. $67,000 of that is salary and benefits increases. They're adding a recreation supervisor, and then they have $10,000 of capital items, which include a shed and ice machine at Markey Park, and also $10,000 in addition to their contractual line item, and that is based on the current year's actual and what that trend is. Under High Blue Wellness Center, those expenses are going to increase about $86,000. $33,000 of that is a salary and benefit increase. In this department, while they reorged the finance manager and moved that to administration, they did add a maintenance worker for the wellness center, and then they have $54,000 of capital items and $3,000 for their Matrix app. With the aquatic center, which is the indoor pool, they have an increase of $183,000. $137,000 of that is capital items, and $35,000 is the increase cost of their pool management contract. And then in the special events line item, which again is Memorial Station, it's $8,000 in salary and benefits increases, $12,000 of capital items, and $7,000 of the special events expense line item. And that is related to the park taking over the car shows. And then I have a tab here for their capital outlay, just so you can see their total capital outlay is almost $470,000. And those expenditures include their website, improvements to the Markey Trail and playground improvements, a new HVAC for the maintenance shop, a trailer for the skid steer, a new van for park maintenance, and then at the outdoor water park, they're planning on replacing the outdoor pool chairs, and the recreation department is planning on adding a shed at Markey Park. The High Blue Wellness Center is planning, those expenditures include a storage shed for High Blue Wellness Center and a fire panel. And then the indoor pool they're planning to do an indoor pool replaster, pool deck repairs, and then for the park special events department, stage lighting. And Shanna is actually here if you guys have any questions. She's sitting in for Brian tonight, and she's their finance manager and can answer all your budget questions.
Any questions on the park budget?
Okay. And
Seeing none?
we'll go on to page 46, the Hotel Motel Tax Fund. So if you want to look at the details, that is on page 46. You can see that we're projecting a little bit more in hotel motel sales tax. That is really based on fiscal year 22 actual anticipated revenues post-COVID. We didn't really know what was going to happen in the prior year, and so we estimated sales tax revenue receipts a little lower just based on what had been happening. Also included here, which is a difference, is we have included a $600,000 transfer from the general fund into this fund. And that is actually going to be used and proposed to be used, if council approves of this. It's included in this capital outlay item, and it is for land acquisition dollars that would be set aside in the event that an abandoned or blighted property came onto the market. And this would allow the city the opportunity to stabilize property values and add underperforming properties to the city's tax roll.
Can you explain that? This hotel motel tax is for the economic development? Make sure everybody understands that.
Hotel motel tax, due to the ballot language, is restricted to only be used for economic development purposes in the city. And there is a 5% tax that is added to transient guest rooms when somebody stays at one of our hotels. Additionally, the other items that went, that increased, salaries and benefits increased by about $7,000. $5,000 of that was due to the COLA, the 3% COLA increase, and $2,000 of that was due to the merit increase. And then you can see that services were reduced by about $20,000. What was reduced were consultant services and legal services, and those were reduced not so much because they weren't needed, and we really wanted to include them in the budget, but we did it in order to actually balance this budget. So it was a cut that we hope to be able to add back into next year's budget if revenues in this fund continue to grow. And also there was a cut to training and public information as well under those services.
Were we cutting one specific thing, or do we know what we're cutting?
Just the fact that we have a consultant services available if we needed to, and we might, if something was necessary, we would absolutely come to council and ask for additional general fund monies. We wouldn't want to not do something that needed to be done, so we would definitely come back to council and ask if we could have an additional transfer from the general fund to this fund if it was necessary.
Okay.
What we don't like to do is we like to budget worst case scenario so that we're not having to come to council and ask for additional money during the year. That is our preference. We want to make sure that the budget is an all-encompassing, well thought out plan so that we're not having a last minute emergency and needing to come and let you guys know that we have to come up with money unexpectedly or cut expenses that we didn't intend to cut.
Sheila, ever since the hotel motel tax, we ever had a transfer money into this other than capital outlays? I mean, even last year or whatever.
We have not.
Okay.
Since it came in-house. So how it worked before when the city had, when economic development was not in-house and we had out-of-house, was that we would transfer in all the hotel motel tax into the general fund to reimburse for the outside contract. And so the outside contract was more than the hotel motel tax was producing. But since it's come in-house, that has not been an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and
Wait a minute, did you explain what that 700,000 is in capital outlay?
the $600,000 is for the land acquisition dollars that I had talked about. And then there's $100,000 that the city council set aside many years ago that we continue to carry over each year. And it is for site development dollars that the council has set aside to address possible development site deficiencies if there was an instance where we needed to cure deficiencies in order to attract a business that would provide excellent jobs and revenues for the city. Okay, and
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Is that the 700,000 on page 47?
yes, $600,000 of that is for land acquisition dollars, and $100,000 is for site development. Yes,
Summary.
yes. Okay, and I thought we would go on to the street fund now. The summary is on page 48, and I'm going to just kind of use the summary to discuss this. If you want to look at the revenues in detail, those are on page 49. This fund is showing about $580,000 more in sales tax revenue this year. That is because of current year revenue, sales tax increases, a slight increase to that, and then also the the effect of Chewy. You can see that street cuts are projected to decrease a little bit, and that is simply due to we're planning on less permits next year, and that's why those numbers are lower. And then state motor vehicle taxes and fees are increased by about $114,000 next year. There is a reduction in the other revenues, and that is due to in fiscal year 2022, there was a $48,000 transfer from the general fund to, it was because of a swap in vehicles between the planning department and public works. So that's what that was from. And then if you look on pages 50 to 51, the expenditures for the street fund are detailed. The big changes here are approximately $258,000 of increase in the salary and benefits line items. That is mainly due to 4 additional street maintenance workers that are added in this year's budget. The plan for those street maintenance workers, 2 will be doing the same thing to increase maintenance of our current streets. 2 of those street maintenance workers are planned to be specific to the right-of-way to help clean up and maintain our portion of I-49 that makes, beautifies our city and the entrance into the city. Right? Okay. Also, there's a reduction because of those additional, 2 of those additional street maintenance workers, a reduction to the overtime budget. $7,000 of an increase because of the merit increases. $25,000 in changes due to grade changes. We have our street maintenance workers. We've really been impacted on our ability to attract and retain street maintenance workers due to the increase in wages in the market. And so we tried to address that with the grade changes. And our street maintenance workers, those lower positions, will end up getting dollars because of those grade changes. Also, $31,000 due to the COLA. And then there was actually a $59,000 decrease in overall salaries due to benefits and turnover. So sometimes we will have somebody that has family coverage that will leave, or we will have budgeted vacant positions at family coverage, not knowing what benefits somebody will pick. We want to make sure that we have enough money set aside to cover that budget. But then when we actually hire somebody, they end up only having single coverage. And sometimes that generates a savings, and that is, in this case, for this year, between the prior year and this year's proposed budget, it saved up almost $60,000 in salary and benefits. Okay, and then in our services line item, the big change, it's about $75,000 more than last year. The big changes are $62,000 for outside mowing and weed killing services, $2,000 for cleaning. The public works facility, currently we have an employee who cleans City Hall and the annex, and then also is doing some other jobs. Instead of them also taking the time to travel to the new Public Works facility, Public Works is planning on hiring an outside cleaning company, which will cost $2,000 for the year for their building. And then $10,000 for GPS. In the supplies budget, there's a almost $68,000 decrease. That really is a $100,000 decrease for street striping, and a $25,000 increase for brining supplies to be able to brine the streets. Street preservation, there was no change. Utilities we're projecting that those are going to increase a little over $31,000. $10,000 of that is additional natural gas costs for the new facilities, $5,000 in electricity, and then $13,000 for electricity for the street lights due to added street lights and then also just inflationary costs. The interfund transfers are going to go up slightly. There's a transfer from this fund to the Y Highway Marketplace Tiff Fund. That is a contractual transfer that is in the development agreement. Any questions about that? And we will go into the capital items in detail, but any of the things that I just talked about?
I want to go back to revenues. The state gas tax went up, but I'm not seeing any real changes on the revenues on the gas tax that we get from the state. Are we not expecting any big changes there?
I'm hoping, but right now there's a bill to get rid of that gas tax increase.
Yeah, I know there's stuff in legislature trying to get rid of it, but okay.
So just to be conservative,
Gotcha.
we went with the actual trend and didn't count our chickens before they hatched. Okay, and then street fund capital outlay, there is $300,000 towards the public works facility for the street department's share. Is this the last year for that? Will it be completed? Okay.
I hope so.
And then $1 million for street preservation program improvements. That is maintenance of our existing streets. Regulatory street signs, $32,000. $75,000 for the road that will be going to the new dog park over by Menards. There is equipment purchases of a dump truck, a snow plow, a salt spreader, a truck-mounted liquid brine spraying system, and then the truck and equipment for those right-of-way, those two new positions for maintaining right-of-way on I-49. And then also there is $60,000 for a new truck and there is $592,464 that is in our vehicle equipment replacement plan allocation. That money is kind of like a savings account that will be used specifically to replace vehicles in future years. And the total of the capital outlay in the street budget is $2.5 million. Any questions about that?
I just have a technical question. Was there not a reason why you didn't do revenues over expenditure line on this? Have you done in the other ones?
So our revenue over expenditures line on each of these funds, just so the council knows, that actually gets budgeted in the rainy day account so that it's included in the budget, and if something happens, you guys we would never spend money out of the rainy day, but if something happened and we had to come to you to ask for money, something unexpected, we would let you know there was X amount of money in the rainy day, so you would know you wouldn't have to transfer it from another fund. Mayor, are you saying that it's the revenue over expenditures isn't on the summary page, or?
The summary page, but it's not on the line item page. That's the question I had. I guess it don't matter if you don't do it that way.
I think I don't do it that way because you have revenues on one page and then
Okay.
because we have the summary page.
Summaries, okay, I'm just making sure, that's all.
But any of the funds that don't have that summary page, it would have it.
All right.
Okay. Let's see. So now I'm going to be kind of jumping around. I started with the funds that had personnel costs. Those are always the biggest ones. And then I kind of just picked no reason, just randomly of what to go over next. So if you want to go back on to page 45, this is the street impact fee fund. Street impact fees are restricted to be used only for adding capacity to our transportation system. So it wouldn't be able, you would never be able to use this money to maintain existing streets. You could only use this money to widen a street or to build a brand new street. And so the impact fees are paid whenever there are construction projects. And so based on the construction projections, revenues are going to go down slightly. And then there is a transfer being budgeted to the Street Projects Fund, Fund 442. And that money is going to go towards the Peculiar Drive Realignment Project to help with our grant match. Any questions about that? Okay, and on page 54, this is the Capital Improvement Sales Tax Fund. These dollars are restricted to be used only for capital improvements. What the city is using them for is to make debt payments on different projects. The police court and annex building, bonds were issued to remodel that. Also paying for the Y Highway and 71 interchange, the DNR 2008 DNR energy loan that actually went into this building, and then the fire and emergency management lease are all being paid with this capital improvement sales tax. All of that, this debt is going to be repaid in full in March of 2027. And this is the question 3 that City Council will be putting towards the voters to ask them to extend this sales tax in order to pay for the water lines replacement. The sales tax currently expires December 31st, 2028. Also being included in this fund, Cornerstone Point TDD is reimbursing the city for improvements that were made, and we get just a little bit of revenue. Next year is expected to increase. Casey's moved, and that increased the revenues that are coming in. Any questions about this fund? The next fund, and I am so sorry, it's the Park Sales Tax Fund, and I didn't put the page number. It looks like maybe page 55. So again, you can see that the sales tax is expected to increase, just like it is in all of the other funds. They are also, the park is, in addition to doing a transfer to their operating fund, they are also paying debt for their indoor pool and community center. And that debt will also be repaid in full March 1st, 2027. Any questions about this? Okay, the next fund is Fund 231. And again, I didn't put the page number. It is the Mayor's Christmas Tree Fund. And this is just an in and out. So we seek donations. We use those donations to pay minimal costs for the Mayor's Christmas tree lighting ceremony, and the balance of all of that money gets paid to Belton Welfare Association. So the city doesn't keep any of that money. Next on page 59 is the Special Training Fund. This fund, because of court fees and costs, and also a contribution from the state, they give us money that can only be used for training for commissioned law enforcement officers. And typically we will, if revenues allow, we will take money instead of funding it from general fund for commissioned law enforcement officers and use this money for some of that training. And so this year we're planning on using $25,000 for training. There are 3 funds, the Marquee Parkway Regional Detention Fund, the Drug Seizure Fund, and the DWI Recovery Fund, that have no expenses budgeted out of them this year. So we can absolutely look at them and talk about them if you want, but I didn't put them on the spreadsheet because there are no expenditures that are being budgeted out of them this year. And then I'm ready to talk about Tiff Funds. And I probably will explain one in detail maybe, and then let you guys ask questions. First, I'd like to tell you that the Belton Town Center TIF Fund and the Belton Marketplace TIF Fund, those are in the budget book for historical purposes only. We include in our budget book the 2 prior years of activity, and so that is why that's in there, but we won't be going over them tonight because they have their expired TIFs. But we will start with, on page 61, the Cedar Tree TIF Fund. And so I'd just like to point out that the revenues in these line items, you have payments in lieu of taxes, and then this Cedar Tree TIF has a CID within its boundary. And so the CID also pays a payment in lieu of tax. And you can see that the total revenue in this particular TIF is $151,000 for payments in lieu of tax. And then we have something called EATs. EATs are a nickname for economic activity taxes. It's sales taxes. And you can see that the city is paying money into the fund from city sales taxes. We are also getting money from the TDD and from the county. And the reason that that is important is because all of these taxing jurisdictions are benefited by these new businesses coming in. And so they are all helping pay for the infrastructure that was, and the developer expenditures that are being reimbursed. And then if you'll see, if I didn't make a mistake, and I think I would have caught it this year when I was doing this, but Councilman Powell might find one, the revenue should equal the expenditures, always. And it's made up of two parts. First of all, there's a lot of accounting that city staff does for TIFs. And it's a lot of work. We are allowed to get reimbursed for our administrative costs that we are spending. And in this case, it's $14,300 from Cedar Tree. And then all the rest of the money under expense allowance, that is money that is going back to the developer to repay costs that have been certified. So the TIF commission approved that the costs were eligible. The developer had to turn in receipts and information. We checked them to make sure that they were accurate and they were eligible. Once we did that, the city actually certified and said, yes, these costs are true and they're eligible under this TIF contract to be reimbursed. And then once that's done, we start paying back until those developer costs are repaid in their entirety. Now, I'm not planning on going into great detail in the other TIFs, but it's the same exact concept. But I would be happy to talk about any of the other TIF funds if any of you have questions.
I want to say a couple things like this. When you said sales tax and the revenue, the city sales tax, the 69,640, that's sales tax coming from inside that TIF district, from businesses in that TIF district. I just want to clarify that.
Yes, okay. That is true. And not only that, this Cedar Tree TIF actually was in existence before the TIF was approved. So these sales taxes, we get to keep 100% of all the revenues that were generated prior to that. This is only the new revenues that were generated because of the remodel and redevelopment of that shopping center. And it's 50%. Half of it the city keeps. 50% of those sales taxes go into this TIF fund.
Do a CID have a sunshine like a TIF, or are they continuously?
They do. In their documents, they have an expiration date.
Okay, and they can extend that if they want to at that time, or?
The typical one prior to August 28th, 2021, where the state legislature enacted a change to the CID Act that sets the maximum term at 27 years, subject to city council approval of a new petition. The typical one was 20-year term or 23-year term if they knew it was going to run with a TIF, with 2 optional 10-year renewals that the CID board of directors would have to request from the city. This CID only imposes a special assessment. There is no sales tax portion. There's only a special assessment on the property owners. So this would be one I would hazard to guess, once all development costs are paid off, is most likely going to be stopped.
Then my next question is on the Y Highway, there's 2 different areas. Is that because of 2 different owners, or is that, you got Project Area 1 and Project Area 2?
So it's split up because Project Area 1 and this is on page 62, Project Area 1 is the grocery store. Those revenues are pledged to bonds, the bondholders. Okay. So that is why those are broken out and we track them separately. Project Area 2 revenues are actually coming to the city to reimburse us for our costs for widening the improvements to 163rd Street.
Yeah, thank you.
And then we also have Belton Plaza TIF, that's on page 63. Southtown Plaza TIF, page 64.
Any other questions on TIFs?
Okay, on pages 65 and 66, this is the general obligation bond fund. All of the revenues in this fund come from property tax revenues. And they are all restricted by law to pay the debt service on those general obligation bonds that were approved by voters. Also in this line item for next year, I have the budgeted in revenues bond proceeds. Those bond proceeds would be if voters approve question number 1, the no tax increase street bonds. The $21 million of that would be from those bond proceeds. I went ahead and put them in our budget so we could adopt them. There's never a problem if you don't get the revenues, but there is if we don't do a budget amendment in the middle of the year to transfer those funds out. So I went ahead and included them in. And also, I am anticipating that we will be issuing the remaining previously approved stormwater bonds to finish our stormwater projects. So we are allowed to pay the fees that we pay to the city, or not to the city, to the county for them collecting our taxes from this fund. It's only the portion of fees that we're paying related to these revenues. And then all of the rest of the expenses are principal and interest on those bonds. Any questions about that? If not, we're ready to move on to the 3 capital project funds. And on page 67 is the first one. This is the Streets Capital Project Fund. You can see this is just accounting for the Peculiar Drive realignment project. We have revenues from the $1.8 million in STP funds. That is actually a grant. And then we also have money from the MoDOT cost share. And then the city did part of our match in last year's budget, $1,250,000, plus an additional $533,000 in this year's budget to complete our match. That total project is expected, well, in next year's budget, construction is expected to be $4.7 million.
Sheila, wasn't North Scott supposed to be started in this budget?
It's in our next fund.
Okay.
You'll see it there. The Fund 445 on page 68. You can see that we have $1.9 million in grant revenues for North Scott. And then we have a transfer for general capital of a little over $1 million. And then $21 million in, if voters approve those GO bonds to do base repair and overlay. But the other project that is included in here is $3 million for the North Scott corridor, or North Scott street improvements. And then the final capital project fund is on pages 69 and 70. These are the stormwater projects. You can see that I have included in revenues the bond issue that I anticipate that we will be doing to issue the remaining approved stormwater bonds. And then we are planning on spending $1.8 million on Buena Vista, almost $2.7 million, although it will probably be more than that if we don't get this $4 million spent before the end of the year. But this was a very expensive Hargis Lake stormwater project, very expensive project. Additionally, Lacey Estates and Cambridge Road, almost $1.4 million. Height Avenue and Bryan Avenue, $1.7 million. And Hawthorne Drive and Red Bud Lane, almost $1.1 million in next year's budget.
Argus
Did you
Lake,
Go ahead.
Argus Lake, that's Hillcrest, that stormwater project on Hillcrest, right? It's just named Argus Lake for whatever reason, okay.
Are you saying that's the cash carryover from this year to next year, or is that?
Yeah, that's unspent bond proceeds from our last issue. So we sold bonds. We have 3 years to get rid of those funds. Our 3 years is up in the fall, and I anticipate that we'll be spending all that money, and then we will issue the remaining $3.2 million.
We just made a comment that we're gonna spend 2.65, but if we don't do something soon, we might spend more. That's why I didn't know if that was.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was meaning, see how we have $4 million in construction costs in the current year's budget?
Right.
I don't know. We've,
Well, I see that there's like a 2.65 million difference there. I didn't know if that was a cash carryover.
no.
But that's-
I mean, it is from cash carryover, but if we don't spend this $4 million, then when we do our cash carryover amendment, we'll increase this amount. We might not be able to spend this $4 million before March 31st,
Right.
if that makes sense. But it's definitely needed for this stormwater
That's what I was trying to
project.
figure out, if this is new money, that this 2.6.
No, it's just that we had planned on doing $4 million of construction costs this year, this current fiscal year. I just am not sure that we're going to actually get it done, but we'll definitely, if we don't, we'll definitely do $6.6 million next year.
Okay.
And with that, I'm done.
Any questions about budgets that we just got to going over? So we will adjourn the work session and take a 5-minute break. All right, call the meeting to order. Pledge of Allegiance, Councilmember Powell.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen. That's over here.
New Jeep.
It'll go up after a while, surely.
Whoever drives an F-150.
Sorry.
All right, can I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Larkey,
Here.
Councilmember White,
Here.
Councilmember Powell,
Here.
Councilmember Trutzel,
Here.
Councilmember Kraft,
Here.
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Goff,
Present.
Councilmember Lawson. Here. Councilmember Peak. Here.
We have a quorum. No personal appearances tonight. Consent agenda, one motion, non-debatable, to approve recommendations noted. Any member of the council may ask for an item to be taken from the consent agenda for discussion and separate action.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mayor, I'd like to take item G off the agenda.
Item G. Anybody else? Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item G, a motion approving resolution R 2022-15.
A resolution of the City of Belton, Missouri, authorizing and approving an on-call contract for towing services with ITR LLC, DBA All City Tow Service.
Present.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
My discussion with you, Chief, is two things. First, that company you were awarding it to is a Kansas City, Kansas company. And I know we have other companies in our area that's bid on that. And I guess they were awarded, but they're not showing up in my packet tonight because I got a call saying that they're going to split the contract.
That it's an on-call contract, and so when this particular company, they have a contract with Kansas City, Kansas, and some other agencies around, but they're actually leasing the property that Eckert's had in our city, and so they're taking over that lot. So they're local in regards to that. Vehicles we've taken there for our citizens, making it more convenient. My intention is we have another tow company, J Southland, that we're going to be working with. However, J Southland purchased or leased some property here and has not made any improvements to it that would fit the contract along with the fencing and being able to store vehicles. And so he received a letter probably today or tomorrow saying once he makes those improvements and he's ready to go, that we would verify that. That would be our second one. And then the contract is not rotating. We have the ability to call any tow company that fits that purpose. And so those two were the most competitive when it came to the ones that we took in.
Well, he's already got that letter because he's called me saying that they're splitting the contract, which he didn't. But what looks like what we're signing here today is a specific contract for one tow company.
It's on call, and so it's just one of many. And we did this with the help of Public Works because they have on-call contracts that they've done with different.
So this doesn't exclude you from using two different companies?
No, and state statute doesn't restrict us from have an exclusive, and it also doesn't tell us that we have to have rotating either.
So I guess my question is, what bids do you use? Do they honor their bids that they propose, or you have the same rates? Are you gonna get together with both of them, come up with the rates that each one's gonna use the same?
No, they would have individual rates, but those two companies were the lowest when when you compared them to the rest.
Okay, thank you.
I guess the question I have, if I'm set to sign this tomorrow, if it passes, I mean, I guess I see where it says all city tow services, but I guess I'm not seeing where it's on call. I mean, I see it's on call, but I don't see anywhere, and I may have missed it, but I don't see anything where you would share. So can you point that out to me? If that other company or any other companies get involved?
What I would do is I'd bring back a new resolution that would say for them, if right up there in the very top, it says a resolution for the city of Belton authorizing and approving an on-call contract for tow services with ITR LLC, doing business as All City Tow Service. When I bring back the second one from, say, for instance, J Southland, it would have J Southland in there. We're just adding them as we move
Adding
forward.
them as a contract like we do.
Yes.
Public Works on call.
Right. So I worked with him, and it's just no different like for our heating and cooling.
Yeah.
We have about 5 people that we use for heating and cooling that are under contract, depending who can come, what the equipment is, and where it's at.
Well, how do you determine who you're gonna call in those situations? I mean, you're out there on a accident scene, are you,
What the scope that we're looking at is for the tow service to arrive within 15 minutes, and if it's weather related, within 30 minutes. And so we keep track of all those times. And we, like when I met with All City, we're going to meet with them twice a year and actually share what their performance is. Because in the past, the police department's had problems with tow services, basically violating that time period. And we've had officers out there for 40 minutes or an hour waiting for tows. And so if that case should happen, we are going to be documenting the response times, and then we're just going to move to a different company and sever the contract.
well, I mean, I know you're almost a year into this job now, so, I've always been told Eckerd Tow, one of the biggest problems they only had 3 tow trucks. So if they were out doing some other stuff, we had an accident, they didn't have the access, and I don't know if All City has more than 3 tow trucks here also.
Yes, during the bidding process, they had to identify that they can handle tows of all types, and whether or
I know
not,
on the tow package, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it said it had 9 heavy haulers, but how many of those are actually in Belton?
well, they're in the metro area, and there's one in to the south. We know that it's over by Pleasant Hill. It's kept over in Pleasant Hill area.
I mean, because when I looked them up on the internet, I mean, it showed that they were officed out of Kansas City, Kansas, St. Joe, Odessa, and Independence. So none of those are going to be roughly within 30 minutes of our location. That's why when I started looking into this, like going, well, they only got 3 tow trucks.
Yeah, they got, I do know that they have,
In Belton, I'm looking at.
yeah, they have 3 in the Southland, and they have filled in for Eckert since, I want to say, the last 4 months.
Okay.
And so we've actually been tracking their response, and they've actually been pretty on time.
I just want to make sure of how you guys are going to determine who shows up and on this stuff, so.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, roll call, or all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Regular agenda A, a motion approving the final reading of Bill 2022-06.
An ordinance of the City of Belton, Missouri, authorizing the acting city manager to enter into a first amendment to the contract for waste collection services agreement with WCA of Missouri, LLC, for the provision of waste disposal services, including curbside recycling for the City of Belton.
Present.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Go ahead, Councilman McCart.
Mayor Larkey, one of the things I'd like to bring back to council, I know Rob did it on his own, and me and the mayor and Chet, and Perry, I should say Councilman Goff and Mayor Larkey and Councilman Trutzel, went down to the recycling center yesterday, and that was actually a pretty neat experience watching how that is separated and sent out. But I think for me is learning about where that's actually going. So there's been some fodder on Facebook. It's always good stuff on there. Talking about how none of this stuff is being recycled and all that other stuff. And I can sit here and tell you that they are selling that. They're shipping out a lot of times two semi-loads a day of just cardboard and plastics, and like one semi-load a day of tin cans. So going down there and learning more about the recycling program was interesting to me, and looks like Rob has a nice little presentation here that the last thing I'll talk about, Mayor, and I'll be done with this, is the city and the city council approved a survey, and we sent it out to our community. And we had, I heard 1,000 people it was sent to. 423 of our households in our community sat down and took the time to fill it out. We get elected to listen to our community, and I think a survey like what we put out there is a great way to listen when people tell us what they want. It's frustrating because I know I'm not a politician, never have been, never will be. But I know last year during the election process, a lot of fodder out there talking about how the city councilmen, and I was one of them, don't listen to the citizens of our community. And now we have a survey that says 85% want some type of recycling, and some of you guys don't want to listen. You can do what you want, but now they got written proof saying we don't listen to them. Absolutely written proof that we don't listen. Recycling is only $4.93 a month. It's a cart fee that's $1.80. So when you look at that recycling thing, it said $4 for every 2 weeks. Now we're talking $4.93 every week. This is what citizens ask us to do. So you guys can vote ever how you want, but I'm going to listen to the citizens again. I listened for the last 2 years, water increases. Yeah, everybody liked me last year because we didn't have a water increase. Everybody hates me now because I'm listening. It's the same, I'm listening to the same people. Mayor, I'm supporting this because that's what the citizens want. Thank you.
Start down there. Right.
Well, last night I had a small gathering. Is it on?
I can't hear you.
Going to. You just have to talk into it. Last night I had a small gathering of Ward 4, and I listened to them. Not a single one wanted the recycling. Now, some of them recycle. They like going down to Redbridge because it's for a nonprofit. And matter of fact, they have several ideas that they would like the city council to consider. And so I did listen. Well, it was small. It wasn't near the 400, but I haven't had a single person email me telling me they want it. I've had some that's emailed me that said they didn't, and obviously there's Facebook. So I want to put a proposal in that we postpone this vote, so that way we can take a look at things that are out there, that are other options.
So are you making a motion to
Not
postpone?
proposal, a motion.
So
that
we have a
propose this
motion to
vote.
postpone on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to postpone. Any discussion? Go ahead.
The contract proposal that we have tonight expires at the end of February. So you can't necessarily postpone this contract amendment. You would have to vote to approve or deny it. It cannot be postponed because it expires at the end of this month.
I guess we could postpone it for 1 week or 2 weeks?
Yes, that's true. I was thinking that we didn't have another meeting until March.
You have to postpone the contract, or you can just postpone the whole idea and concept until later, table it, or.
I would note that what is being voted on is the amendment to the contract, not necessarily the idea about recycling. So if the city council is going to relook at the entire idea of recycling, I guess you could postpone it, and then city staff would have to gather all the information regarding every other potential other plan, and then bring that back, and then you could vote again at the second meeting in February. I don't know if that could be honestly accomplished in a 2-week time span.
Anybody else on the motion?
Yeah, I just have a question
motion to
for
postpone.
Brett. What we would be looking at in 2 weeks? I mean, we were looking at other ways of doing it, like getting the potential for a grant for a nonprofit to come to Belton and provide this. Maybe go with on-site, which we are not on-site, but single site as opposed to curbside, which we talked about a few weeks ago. Other ways to fund this, so that a lot of people are concerned that I'm not sure where Dave's numbers came. I'm sure they're right, but maybe a different way of putting them. But was $6.73 it was proposed, and people say, well, yeah, but the survey was for $4. So, I mean, they were asking if people would spend $4 a month for this. So, what's that?
That was bi-weekly.
The $4 was bi-weekly in the survey.
It was bi-weekly. Okay. So, but the point is, they were asked if they would spend $4 a month for recycling. So now we're asking for $6.73 for weekly. And so another way of looking at it is there a way to get that price, whether it's bi-weekly or weekly, curbside, down to $4, or even get a single site? Because I think, not a single site, but a non-curbside facility. I think that was even over $4. So there's a lot of different ways. I'm not sure what we're looking at, if we're all going to go out in different directions and each have an assignment and come back in 2 weeks, or who's doing what. We've just said we'd delay it, and then we'll be here 2 weeks from now having the same discussion. Unless we specifically say what we want to look at.
Anybody, other discussion? Brett?
Go ahead. Well, Mayor, I was on that tour yesterday for GFL, and I was impressed. The company is a very good company, and they do a great job. I learned a lot from that. So my concern is not of the company and the program that they have, but it is also of the fact that I have had more emails and texts and phone calls over this issue than I've had in being on the council for 5 years on any subject. And most of them are saying that they felt like they were left out, even though we did the survey. They all say that nobody asked me, and it should be an option that I have. It's something extra you're wanting of us, and I didn't have an opportunity to voice my opinion on that. So I think that most people would be fine with an option program, but I understand that's difficult to do, but it is being done at places. So I think that the people ought to have at least the right to have it on a ballot and say we want it or don't want it, or an option program for it. If we can't give that to the public, then I'm going to have to vote no.
You want to go? You were up first. Do you want to go, or do you want?
Go ahead and let them go, and then I'll.
Check. Councilman.
I guess it's my chance now to go out and attack social media. Typically, social media brings out anybody who's opposed to anything. You very seldom find anybody that goes to social media and says, you know, I like what you're doing. It's a great place to say that everybody's like me and everybody doesn't like this, but you know, that's not the case. You got people out there with their opinions, and they're very loud when they're opposed to something. It seems like everybody around them is the same way. I've gotten off social media because I don't like what appears in social media. It started out as a nice project, but then it got to into the politics and got to be twisted terribly. I'm very supportive of the recycling. You know, we have a finite amount of natural resources. If we don't take care of those natural resources, your kids and your grandkids are going to pay a horrendous price to live in society here. I don't care if it's going to be oil, if it's going to be aluminum, if it's going to be paper trees and whatever have you. It's going to be a mess, and I'm willing to pay a little bit of money now to avoid them paying a great deal of money in later. And we talk about water. You look at what's going to happen. I just got to read an article about the coast, people in Florida and on the California coast. Some of them are saying they have to pay up to $22,000 a year for insurance because of floods, because of hurricanes and whatever have you. The issue with water and anything else, our natural resources, we got to take care of them, and we're not doing a very good job right now, to be honest with you. So any attempt to try to migrate those situations is what I would prefer. So I'm very supportive of trying to pay a little bit of money now as opposed to having my grandkids pay a lot of money later.
Go ahead, Angela.
Okay, clarification first. Is this discussion about the motion to postpone or discussion about what's on the,
The discussion should be about the motion to postpone.
okay.
So we kind of got off track a little bit, so we need to get back on track.
With-
It should be about, any discussion should be about the motion to postpone.
I have one for each. So one for the postponing.
Okay.
I feel like what I was hearing from Sheila and our city attorney, whose name just flew out of my head. Sorry about that. I know you though. Patrick, sorry. Yes, yes. That we probably, need to basically vote on what's proposed as far as GFL doing it, yes or no. And if we're wanting other options, then we need to vote no for the GFL because that's not another option. That's a specific contract. So if we know we want other options, voting no on that still gives us time to look at other options. It doesn't say we can't look at recycling ever again. It says we're just saying we're not going to do it this specific way, as opposed to pushing that off as well.
And again, to Brett's motion, maybe Patrick, I remembered your name this time. Maybe you could explain what you told me, before, I think it was before the meeting, that indeed we're not discussing prices for this. Even though the prices have been all out there, we're voting on just doing this with GFL, right?
Yes, the amount that the city collects for the consolidated waste program is by ordinance. This is not amending that ordinance. This is authorizing amendment to the contract for those services. Now, the city does typically pass on the full amount, but that is not being voted on tonight. Simply what is being voted on tonight is to authorize an amendment to the contract that would allow WCA to take on the necessary capital improvement costs to provide recycling services to the city of Belton.
Okay, so if we pass this and we still have time to drive Sheila crazy by saying here's some places where we can take some money and make up this difference, at least reduce the cost from what was been reported in some of these handouts.
Obviously, and I'll let Sheila talk more about accounting, this is fund accounting, enterprise fund accounting specifically, so typically you don't want to utilize tax dollars in fund accounting because it's supposed to operate on its own and stand on its own 2 feet, but that is correct.
Councilmember White.
The reason I made the proposal, like that, whatever it's called.
Motion to postpone.
Is because I haven't had 6 months, 9 months to look at this. I wasn't on the council when you did the survey. So I've been on the council a week. I'm listening to the people that are wanting to talk to me about this, and I have to go with what they are saying. And so I'm not against, in no ways am I saying I'm against recycling. What I'm saying, though, is I'd like to have more time to be able to see if there's other options that our citizens might like better than having a non-optional
Service.
service. That's why the proposal.
Anybody else on the motion to postpone? Go ahead,
I
go ahead, go ahead.
think what
ahead.
I'm wanting to say is then,
Go ahead,
I
go
agree,
ahead.
I would like to postpone, or if that means, saying no to GFL, then yes, I'm saying no to GFL right now then, until we look at some possible options.
Anybody else on the motion to postpone? Seeing none. All in favor to postpone?
Aye.
Aye.
All not in favor to postpone?
Aye.
Motion fails. So we're back to the motion 2022-06 to amend the contract with WCA for recycling services. Go ahead.
I asked, maybe it's redundant, but I asked if I could present something because at the time I thought I was the only one going down to GFL. Now several have gone down. For the people that haven't gone or for the public, I have about 5 slides here. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do it now.
Okay. So, see if this works. The 2 resident concerns I got from social media was the price of the recycling, including the ongoing cost of the bins, and the likelihood of recycling getting dumped into trash trucks. And this presentation is only addressed by number 2 because we can't really talk about the price to GFL. That's a separate discussion. GFL sorting recycling operation in Harrisonville is the largest in the KC area, and it takes in recycling from several Kansas locations as well as Missouri locations as far away as Springfield. All trucks entering the site pass through a weigh station are ID'd as either trash or recycling. They take in trucks not just from WCLA and GFL, but other trucks. The recycling trucks with recycling in are routed to the recycling building. Mixed recycling, meaning different recycling streams, all recycled in a truck, is dumped on a floor and then fed into a hopper, and conveyors go to the operations floor. And several conveyors, computers, robots, employees separate the recycling into 8 different streams, including 3 kinds of plastic, aluminum, metal cans, sheet metal, etc. This is where a conveyor moves it into the mixed recycling into a huge hopper. These are supposedly movies. Hopefully it's going to play. Let's see. Maybe it won't. There we go. This is some of the conveyors that are taking the trash to different sorting facilities, metals, cardboard, paper. You see computers there. You'll see people there. They have all sorts of things going on to move the recycling to different streams for sale. Sorry, my hand got in the way there. And then let's see if we can go to the next one. Whoops. Okay. I don't know why that got one. Okay, the cardboard and paper require manual labor. I don't know how to get this thing to start, so maybe we'll just tell you that corrugated cardboard is different than paper, is different than cardboard that's like on the back of your tablet, so they have to separate that. I'm not sure why these slides aren't, let's go to another slide. And in this slide, here we go, they have robot steel pickers. If you look in the back of the slide, right in the middle, I guess there we go. You can see that little metal thing going back and forth. It's picking out magnetic material. Oh, yeah. And then they also have, let's see if I can do this. There we go. Aluminum separation. Because of weight, the aluminum cans fly off into the sunset there, and the other stuff goes down. Huge amount of material is handled here. But the point is, they got a lot of employees and a lot of people in the offices who are keeping track of these waste streams and then bundling them for various buyers to come and pick them up. And those are the baled areas. GFL has buyers for all of their 8 to 10 recycled streams and several backup buyers for each stream. Currently, all their recycled streams are profitable. When China abruptly cut off U.S. recycling imports a few years ago, GFL rerouted those loads that were in transit to China back to the U.S., where the GFL had no problems finding buyers. So even though they lost money on shipping, they didn't have to throw away trash. In fact, they've never had to throw away recycling in the trash for the last several years, according to their employees. And GFL has now been stranded for a buyer for any of their recycling streams in the past several years, and they have adequate storage to hold loads if there is a gap between buyers. And finally, there is always possibility that on any given day, a trash truck puts the contents of a recycling bin into a trash truck. The point is that there is no incentive for the GFL to do so, and any truck driver caught doing that would likely be disciplined. Key word is caught. The contract with GFL for recycling services should stipulate that GFL notifies Belton when recycling markets collapse, and the charge for recycling should be deleted from the residents' bills. And I was, again, discussing that with Patrick before the meeting, and he says, it's not explicitly in there, but that's the way the contract would work. As soon as, based on their experience with gyms several years ago, if they stop recycling our recycled stream, then we stop paying them for that service. So I think that's it.
Go ahead, Councilman McCray.
I understand that many feel that the survey the city had conducted with over 400 votes tallied is sufficient enough for us to decide this vote. I, however, didn't feel that the questions explained the full scope of the decision. The questions asked were on an individual basis and didn't mention that it would force all citizens to pay the amount no matter if they use the service or not. If I were asked if I wanted curbside recycling, my answer would be yes. I would be part of that 64%. However, if you ask me if I want curbside recycling, knowing that it means everyone must pay for it, my answer would be no. With that in mind, I set out to do my own informal survey. I reached out to over 500 people, mostly in Ward 2, via Facebook, Nextdoor app, text, phone, email, and in person. What I found is that yes, around 60% want recycling, but they don't want everyone to have to pay for it. I had very few respond yes, they wanted it and they wanted everyone to pay for it. Our citizens want an optional system, and that was not mentioned on the survey. Therefore, with my research, I feel the survey results were invalid. I'm sure many of us here already have an idea of how we plan to vote. I just ask that you think about the responses you have personally gotten and the added research before you vote. I will end this reading with reading an email I received today from someone who has more experience in my seat than I do, and I believe has a very good message about what government should have the right to force on its citizens. Angela, I hope you will vote again no on the proposal of adding recycling to our contract with WCA. There's a major difference between the city mandating citizens pay for their trash removal, a sanitation issue, and that of requiring all citizens to pay for something unnecessary to please a select group of citizens. Thank you, Dean Van Winkle.
Any other discussion on the motion to add recycling to the contract with WCA? Go ahead.
Councilmember Powell, thank you for that presentation. That was super helpful. I wanted to go, but my day job got in the way, so I appreciate that. The conversation around recycling services for Belton has been kind of muddied since last summer when it came to us. If you ordered a $4 coffee and they brought you a $6.73 coffee, you'd be a little upset in context of the price. In context of the environmental impact, the folks that are already recycling for free will likely continue to do so. And if we were really interested in making choices that would alleviate our environmental impact, we wouldn't have 8 people up here with single-use plastics. I'm not saying we should address any policy to mitigate use of single-use plastics in our town. That would be very radical and hard to implement, but I feel like the conversation has gotten very off track from what we are voting on tonight, which is an amendment with GFL to offer recycling at a price that is different than what we surveyed the citizens on. And I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge the holes in my argument right now, which is if we take this out to bid when our trash service comes up again, we will likely see even higher costs for trash service and recycling, and I can acknowledge that. I just think that, at least in my seat, I was elected to be a good steward of folks' tax dollars in our city, and in terms of priorities of this council and what we've got going up on the April ballot, I think we have an obligation to people to meet deferred maintenance in our city with their tax dollars versus adding on a service right now that did poll favorably, but again, the conversation's been muddied, so apologies for the rant, but that is kind of the big picture view I'm taking on this and why I intend to vote no tonight.
Anybody else? Any other discussion? I will, I've watched everything on Facebook and kind of stayed away from it because it's just a muddy quagmire if you get into that. My initial thoughts on recycling was, yeah, I would like to recycle. Initially, when I was running for mayor last April, 70 to 80% of the people I talked to wanted some type of recycling. A lot of them wanted curbside recycling. So, so that's why I feel like we should do this. I get everybody's understanding of the increase in cost. I get that. So this is a very hard decision, and we got to do what's best for the citizens of Belton. So that's where I'm at. So. Any other discussion? Any other information that we need that you have?
I don't know that this matters and we're not voting on rates tonight, but I do want to tell you guys the trash carts that were purchased almost 4 years ago, the last payment will happen in June. And I was running the numbers and I believe that once those trash carts are paid off, we will be able to reduce the fee that is being charged to citizens by 50 cents a month.
Yes, then if this passes, then the fee will go back up for the recycling bins?
We would still need to add the cost of the recycling.
Right, so.
Yes.
So it might be a dip, but
Yes.
Okay.
And maybe I should also just let everybody know that if this contract amendment is changed, the prices stay locked in for a full year. If we don't amend, our contract is going to be looked at to be adjusted for the consumer price index, and that will happen in July.
That was 5.2% this year?
Patrick just told me that the Missouri State Tax Commission certified it at 7%.
7%.
When is the WCA contract up?
I believe we have at least one more year on it, and then we are able to extend for 2 more years if we want twice.
I tell you what, I mean, I'll say this about WCA GFL. I mean, there's 3 of us here that lived through the last trash service, and 2 of you guys lived through it longer than me, and I was only here about 4 months for that one, and WCA GFL's been a blessing to me. I haven't hardly any calls on their issues, so I mean, told that to the gentleman yesterday, that it's been a pleasure dealing with them, so they've been good after the last experience, so.
All right. Anybody else? Last chance. All right. Roll call, please, Angela. Or Andrea, sorry. Sorry,
Angela.
Sorry.
Councilmember Peak,
No.
Lawson,
No.
Kraft,
No.
White,
No.
Goff,
No.
Powell,
Yes.
Trutzel,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
and Mayor Larkey.
Yes. Motion fails. B, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2022-07.
An ordinance amending Chapter 4, Animals of the City of Belton Code of Ordinances.
Present.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Go ahead, Council.
I'm just going to kind of rephrase the context I've gathered around this. So we eliminated some obsolete code regarding registering and licensing your animals with the city, since we haven't been doing that since, I believe, the mid-90s. So this piece of code addresses the limit on number of animals in the city, and since we've removed the previous code about registering your animals with the city, this somewhat becomes obsolete. Does that sound right, Chief Lyons?
Yes, and it's more useful for what the situations that we encounter where someone actually has a dog for a couple of days, feeds it or a week until they find the owner. This doesn't hinder them from doing that.
Did we kind of address that, though, changing the definition of an owned animal from an animal you immediately detain to one that you have for up to 5 days?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
My only questions, maybe for you, Chief Lyons, is we've made a number of changes regarding animal codes and ordinances. And when we changed to say you're not allowed to feed an unowned animal on the exterior of your home, that drew a lot of ire, maybe is the right way to put that. And so I'm just not sure how this change plays with that if someone were to take a 50-pound bag of cat food, cut it open on the exterior of their home for community cats or a feral cat colony, depending on your interpretation, what would stop them from saying, oh, these are now owned animals and they don't leave my yard, so I'm not in violation of the leash law? Like, I just want to understand how all these puzzle piece together.
I think the ordinance that you referred to of the feeding of other animals was specifically wildlife, those living in the wild. And so that example, we would be concerned because there would be other wildlife that would be getting into that food source, like raccoons, rats, mice, that kind of thing, drawing them into a neighborhood where then they're allowing that to interact in there with the potential for spreading disease with domesticated animals and the like.
Gotcha. I feel like I've looked over that a couple times, and it seemed more to be that non-owned animals and this was to discourage feral cat colonies.
Well, we would have a program for that, and so to deal with that, and so that was the whole premise of those earlier ordinances, was to allow those colonies to exist under certain circumstances.
Gotcha. Okay. Do you anticipate we'll see some more recommendations and code changes coming through with this?
I think maybe in a month or two.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
And-
but I think we're almost to the end.
Okay. I appreciate your work on this, and I know that some of these changes just need a little time because, if I'm not mistaken, we spent about $17,000 last year for animal control to transport animals to wayside waifs and surrender them. So I appreciate you and animal control being proactive and looking at our codes and kind of putting together a suite of policies that work for us. So thank you for your work.
Anybody else? Angela?
To piggyback off of her question, you had said we have programs in place for our feral and outdoor cat
what specifically, can you expand on that program and how that's supposed to work? I get the same calls and emails that she has too about this. We can't feed stray cats. Well, we don't want them to starve, and, animal control won't pick them up, so what do we do? So if you could just maybe.
Yeah, we have, it's not us supporting these programs, it's us allowing these programs to operate in our city. And then we have resources that we can hand out through the animal control person. And we have other sources that are, like pamphlets and stuff at the station. And I think you're going to find a lot more social media in regards to that as we start picking that up. And that was why we added the animal control Facebook page. And then we are going to be rewriting or redoing our website, hopefully by the start of the next budget year. But I think it's more that we're allowing these programs to take place, and we're trying to facilitate that. And the best way to do that is to engage with the animal control officer so they can actually steer them in the right direction and actually work it through with them. We've gotten several emails in the past in regards to the feeding of wildlife, and so we try to clear those up as much as possible.
So just to make sure I understand, you would suggest then if they come to me and say, hey, there's a stray cat, animal control won't take it, what do? I suggest them to go back and talk to animal control and see what programs are offered and available for this stray cat.
Right, and that should be happening kind of naturally when they call dispatch, is that we're making that contact. And it might just be a communication thing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Anybody else?
So I guess I'm good and confused. Councilman Kraft, you guys are talking about stuff that we voted on about 2 months ago, right? I mean, this is only about the number of dogs and cats we can have.
Sure, I'm just trying to look at how all these changes play together for an overall animal control / animal welfare policy. I've gotten a ton of feedback since our last code changes.
Well, but I think if people went back and actually looked at our last code changes, we actually allowed them, because I think if you harbored an animal like within a day, you owned it, where now we said 5 days, so it actually gave them more time to take care of that person or that animal outside.
Yeah, so what we did change is changing the definition of an owned animal to allow up to 5 days allowed for trap, neuter, release programs.
And some of that stuff, again, fodder on Facebook, that's exactly what it is. I mean, it's just people don't understand the old rules and to understand what we changed it to. Is that correct? We actually helped them and we didn't hurt them on the old rules. I mean, people on Facebook were complaining about we changed the rules, and now they thought it was worse for them because if they had a cat or dog outside for 5 days, they owned it. Is that what you were talking about?
I mean, if you want to hear kind of a summary of the different complaints / communications I've got about it, I can tell you that. But when the knee-jerk reaction when we changed the code to say you cannot feed a non-owned animal on the exterior of your home, which I understand is to discourage wildlife, raccoons. We've got plenty of problems in my ward with raccoons going through people's trash or getting in their houses. Animal welfare, animal rescue folks took that to mean we would not allow feeding feral or community cats, which is what they call it. And that made a lot of people upset. And a lot of people didn't live in Belton. I got a couple phone calls from folks who right away say, I don't live in Belton, but I care about the welfare of animals. I said, sure, fine. We're talking about animal control. Animal welfare is, well, I'd call that a Venn diagram, and there's definitely overlap. But my reason to bring up questions about this is just to understand the full suite of changes we're making and that they play together, and that we allow time for them to work before we consider any additional changes.
Okay. I was like, well, man, I thought we were talking about the number of animals you could own, and so, thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. C, a motion approving resolution 2022-19. Should we remove this since
You gotta vote
item
no.
A failed?
Please just fail it.
Vote no.
All right.
Okay.
So we have
No, she got to read it.
yeah, you gotta read it now.
A resolution directing and authorizing city staff to purchase residential waste carts for recycling in an amount not to exceed $620,000 and financing the total cost over 3 years.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion fails.
There you go, Mayor.
Really? City council liaison reports.
Cards for no purpose.
I'll lead off with parks, if
All right.
that's all right. Spring sports signups are going on right now. This upcoming Saturday, February 19th, is the Cupid Shuffle Family Dance. I've noticed Parks is hiring for a few positions and looking ahead to summer staffing, so if you are interested, check out their Facebook or website. And the Spring Craft Show is coming up on March 19th.
Okay, Planning Commission was last night, several things in non-public hearings. We approved an extension for another 18 months for the Eagles to start their building, their final development plan. We approved a final development plan to permit express oil change and tire engineers at the corner of East North Avenue and Apple Valley Parkway. That was a 6-1 vote. Consideration of final development plan for the credit union, which Dave touched on earlier. We actually approved their final development plan, and we also considered their final plat and a right-of-way change, an old right-of-way that was vacated. I think those last two items need to come to the city council later, but the planning commission approved both of them. All three, actually.
All right, the only thing I really got is I know we just approved the what do I want to say? Oh, the 150th birthday celebration for the city of Belton in the agenda. We'll get that meeting started soon, and then we'll go from there. Hopefully we'll have a big party. So that's all I have. City manager.
Andrea has an announcement.
We recently found out that the Belton Hy-Vee has selected the Belton Senior Center to be its recipient of the March local reusable bag program. They choose someone, each Hy-Vee store chooses someone each month, a nonprofit, to be the recipient of their donations. So March is going to be our month to receive that. So after the month of March, there'll be something coming to the council to accept that donation.
And then I just want to announce that we are finally ready to do the transition to Paymentus from Click2Gov for our utility billing, online payments, and auto payments. That will be occurring beginning on February 23rd at 3 o'clock, and it's anticipated that it may go until noon on February 24th. Central Square has been very difficult to work with, and they will not, they would charge us a lot of money to do it in the evening or to do it on weekends. And so I apologize for any inconvenience to citizens. We will still be able to take cash or checks at City Hall during that time, but we won't be able to take any credit card payments. We're planning on announcing that on a banner that the website will be down for maintenance during those times. We are also going to make an announcement on Facebook. Just so council knows, we are delaying, there will not be a shut off that week because we don't want somebody's water service to be turned off if they can't make a payment to get turned back on. And so we're taking every step that we can to make it as little inconvenience for citizens as possible. And especially since we have decided to enter into a contract with Munis, Central Square does not want to make anything easy. But we will get through this, and it will be all right, and it will be a better service for our citizens.
Anything else? Go ahead.
Well, in January, I announced that the homeless count for Cass County was going to be postponed, and now it is on February 23rd. Starts at 3:30, goes till the middle of the night, I guess. I've never done it before, but if you want to volunteer, get online at Compass Health and sign up.
Anybody else? Communications? Go ahead.
This is for Chief Lyons. The hotel tier report, usually we get that the first of the year. Now, I know it's only February, but just kind of to put I know you probably haven't been here that long to know exactly, but usually we get that the first of the year. And with Welcome In now gone, that probably will alleviate a lot of the problems, but,
I'll look into it.
okay, thank you.
Anybody else? I'd entertain a motion to enter into an executive session, discuss confidential or privileged communications between a public governmental body or its representatives and its attorneys according to Missouri State Statute 610.021.1, and the meeting adjourn from there.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Councilmember Goff,
Yes.
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Councilmember Peak,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Trutzel,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes?
Kraft.
Aye.
Motion carries.